Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now, let's get started. So, let me take you back to the exact moment when I realized something was wrong. Not just a little off, like, oh, I'm having an off day, but really wrong. It was a family dinner, one of those loud, chaotic get togethers where everyone talks over each other. Plates are clinking silverware, scraping kids running around screaming like little caffeinated gremlins. My brother, who's got this habit of roasting everyone at the table, cracked a joke. Everyone exploded in laughter. Everyone except me. I smiled, nodded, chuckled a little, pretending I got it. You know that fake laugh? Yeah, I nailed it, Oscar-worthy. But inside, pure panic. I hadn't heard a word. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just the noise, too much background chatter, bad acoustics. Maybe someone dropped a fork at the wrong time. Totally reasonable, right? But it wasn't just that one joke. It had been happening a lot lately. Mumbling voices on TV. People talking behind me, sounding like they were underwater. The microwave beeping. Gone. Birds chirping. Hadn't noticed them in weeks. And here's the kicker. Humans are ridiculously good at pretending everything's fine. There's actually a psychological phenomenon for this called normalcy bias. It's where your brain works over time, convincing you that everything is normal, even when it's definitely not. Historians still debate whether this instinct helped early humans avoid panic in dangerous situations, or if it just made them terrible at noticing saber-toothed tigers until it was too late. Anyway, back at the dinner table, my niece asked me a question. Her lips were moving. Everyone was watching me. But her words didn't land, not fully, like a bad radio signal cutting in and out. I guessed what she was asking something about dessert and nodded. Apparently, my answer was wildly inappropriate because she blinked, frowned, and said, that's not what I asked. Yep, caught. That was the first time it hit me that I wasn't just missing random words. I was missing moments, important ones, moments that made me feel connected to the people I loved. And now I was starting to feel disconnected. Like I was sitting in the same room, but trapped behind glass. Little fact for you. Hearing is one of the first senses that starts to fade for most adults, often without them realizing. The World Health Organization says over 1.5 billion people worldwide live with some degree of hearing loss. Wild right. Yet hardly anyone talks about it. You'd think I'd rush to get it checked. But no, I did what every stubborn adult does. I Googled it. Bad idea. Within 10 minutes, I was fully convinced that it was either a harmless earwax situation or I was absolutely dying. So, naturally, I did the most logical thing. I pretended nothing was happening. Smart. Real smart. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. Conversations at work became this weird game of lip reading mixed with guesswork. You don't realize how much you rely on context until you're nodding along to someone's story. And then they say, right. That's why my dog had to be put down. Yeah. I had just smiled and said, oh, awesome. Cue awkward silence. I started noticing other weird things too. Like when I'd wake up in the morning, the left side of my head felt quieter. Not silent, just muffled. You know how it feels when you drive through a tunnel and your ears pop kind of like that. Except it didn't pop back. I remember standing in the shower one morning, water pounding on the tiles, realizing I couldn't hear the water hitting the floor. It was just this dull, weird thud. You never notice how comforting white noise is until it disappears. Funny side note, did you know that jellyfish don't have ears? Yeah, no ears, no brain yet. Somehow they've survived 500 million years. Makes you wonder if we're the ones overcomplicating things. Anyway, the breaking point came when my best friend called. Or, I think he called. My phone rang, but when I picked up, His voice sounded like it was beaming from Mars, static, warbled, completely unintelligible. I panicked, not even gonna lie. Hung up, called back, same thing. Called him on speakerphone. Still nothing. That's when the dread really hit. If I can't even use a phone, what next? That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something scary. I wasn't just losing sounds. I was losing connection. Losing the little everyday things you take for granted. The whispered good nights, the clink of coffee cups in the morning, the laughter that fills a house. And honestly, I felt old. I was barely into my 40s, but this made me feel ancient. But the absolute dumbest part, I still wasn't ready to admit it out loud. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, poking around my ear like I was going to find the Holy Grail in there. I even grabbed a Q-tip, despite every warning label screaming, "Do not insert into ear canal." Naturally, I ignored that. Pretty sure we all do. And yep, nothing. No magical glob of earwax. No satisfying chunk that would explain everything. Just nothing. Still, I clung to the idea that it was something simple. Maybe fluid from a sinus infection. Or maybe allergies. Or, some weird cosmic prank. Because the alternative, admitting something serious might be going on. Yeah, no thanks. I Googled furiously. Sudden hearing loss in one ear. Ear feels full, but not clogged. Home remedies for muffled hearing. Honestly, it was a roller coaster of answers. Some articles said it was just earwax. Others said it was an emergency that required seeing a doctor immediately unless I wanted to go deaf forever. No pressure. At one point, I even came across this charming little tidbit. Apparently, in medieval Europe, they believed that hearing loss was caused by tiny demons living inside your ears. Yep, little demons. Historians still debate whether that was just superstition or if it was their way of explaining inner ear infections before modern science. Anyway, somewhere between panic searching and denial, I remembered an old tip. Try the Valsalva maneuver. That's where you pinch your nose, close your mouth, and gently blow like you're trying to pop your ears on an airplane. So there I was, standing in my kitchen, holding my nose, cheeks puffed out, looking like a confused chipmunk. Did it work? Nope, not even a crackle. In a last-ditch effort, I downloaded one of those sketchy earwax removal videos. You know the ones. A guy with a tiny camera shoves it into his ear canal, and you're treated to a horrifyingly close-up tour of ear hairs and other stuff. I bought one. Overnight shipping. Don't judge me. When it arrived, I set it up, stuck it in my ear, and surprise, nothing. Absolutely nothing, except a horrifying close-up of what I now realize is the least photogenic part of the human body. At that point, I had to admit the truth. It wasn't wax. It wasn't allergies. It wasn't demons, unless they were very good at hiding. Something was actually wrong. Of course, part of me still hoped it was temporary. Like when your ears feel stuffed after swimming. Maybe it would clear up tomorrow, or the day after. Maybe if I ignored it long enough, my body would fix itself. Spoiler alert, it did not. The following week, things started getting embarrassing. I was at a coffee shop, chatting with a friend, and every time he said something, I leaned in and said, "Huh," or come again so often that he finally just said, "Dude, are you messing with me?" Nope, not messing, just missing. And get this, he starts telling me about his uncle, who lost hearing in one ear from a random virus. Apparently, viral infections can sometimes attack the auditory nerve out of nowhere. Doctors call it sudden sensorineural hearing loss. And here's the wild part. If you catch it within 72 hours, steroids can sometimes reverse it. But after that, the window starts closing fast. Yeah, my stomach dropped. I had already waited nearly 2 weeks. Also, fun fact, sharks have excellent hearing, even better than dogs. They can detect low-frequency sounds from miles away. Imagine having shark-level hearing. That'd be handy. Or maybe terrifying, depending on what you accidentally overhear. Anyway, back to me being a stubborn fool. I finally broke. Called an audiologist. Of course, the receptionist was like, "Oh, our next appointment is in 3 weeks." Perfect. Love that for me. But after I said the magic words, sudden hearing loss, suddenly they were like, "Oh, tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be here." Yeah, that's when the panic really set in. If they were bumping me up that fast, it couldn't be good. That night, lying in bed, my brain wouldn't shut up. What if it was permanent? What if it got worse? Would I eventually lose hearing in the other ear? What about music? What about conversations? What about God? Help me. Zoom meetings. The fear wasn't just about hearing. It was about losing a part of myself, losing the ability to fully exist in the world. It's funny how you never think about sound until it's gone. The hum of the fridge, the whir of the fan, footsteps in another room. Silence isn't really silence, it's hollow. And suddenly I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. The next morning, I walked into the audiologist's office, feeling like I was heading straight into a courtroom for sentencing. The waiting room was this weird mix of calming blue walls and suspiciously loud ticking clocks, which honestly felt a little ironic for a hearing clinic. Who designed that? A smiling receptionist handed me a clipboard with paperwork thicker than a Netflix subscription contract. Have you ever experienced dizziness, ringing in the ears, pressure check, and oh yeah, definitely check? After what felt like an eternity, the audiologist called me in. She was this super chipper woman named Jenna, mid-40s, sharp glasses, and the kind of energy that either makes you feel comforted or terrified. I wasn't sure which yet. "All right," she said, "we're going to start with a hearing test. Now, if you've never had a hearing test, let me set the scene for you." She walked me into this tiny soundproof booth that looked suspiciously like the world's saddest escape room. Foam padding on the walls, a tiny window where she sat outside with a headset, and me headphones, strapped on clicker in hand, ready to play Am I Deaf or Just Dramatic? She smiled through the window. Whenever you hear a beep, just click. Sounds easy, right? Wrong. The first few beeps were fine, clear, sharp. I clicked with confidence. Oh yeah, I thought. This is gonna be fine. Then the beeps got quieter, fainter, and then nothing. I sat there in total silence, holding the clicker like an idiot, wondering if the machine was broken, or if I was. Turns out it wasn't the machine. After the beeps came the word recognition part. Jenna said words like baseball cowboy and ice cream through the headset. I was supposed to repeat them back, except sometimes it sounded like face mall loud toy and nice dream. I guessed a lot. At one point, I legit said toilet. The word was definitely not toilet. When it was finally over, Jenna printed the results and turned the paper toward me. "So, this is your audiogram." It was a chart that looked suspiciously like a roller coaster. Except instead of a fun drop, it was a sharp cliff, right around the frequencies where speech lives. "You've got moderate to severe sensorineural hearing loss in your left ear," she said gently. "Your right ear's okay, for now." For now, oh awesome. Totally reassuring. Here's the weird thing about the inner ear. It's a tiny snail-shaped organ called the cochlea, filled with little hair cells that vibrate when sound waves hit them. Those vibrations get turned into electrical signals your brain can understand. Except when those hair cells die, they don't grow back. Ever. Not even a little. Historians still debate whether this evolutionary flaw is just bad design, or whether early humans simply didn't live long enough for hearing loss to be a real problem. So, what caused it? I asked. She shrugged. It could be noise exposure, genetics, aging, or even a random virus. Sometimes we never know. Love that. Love that for me. Then she pulled out a shiny little device. But the good news, we can help. This is a modern hearing aid. I stared at it. It was tiny, sleek, kind of cool looking, honestly. Not the beige banana-shaped thing my grandpa wore back in the day. This one was black, Bluetooth-enabled, and could stream music and phone calls directly into my brain like some sci-fi cyborg upgrade. And then she told me the price. I actually laughed. Thought it was a joke. Spoiler, it was not a joke. Oh yeah, Jenna nodded. Hearing aids are weirdly not usually covered by insurance. It's a thing. A thing indeed. Fun fact, back in ancient Rome, people with hearing loss used hollowed-out animal horns as makeshift hearing devices. Seriously, imagine walking around with a goat horn pressed to your ear. Kind of puts our problems in perspective. Anyway, I left the clinic with a brochure, an overwhelming sense of dread, and the sudden realization that I was now, officially, a person with hearing loss. A label I wasn't ready for. The drive home felt different, quieter, or maybe I was just noticing the quiet for the first time. The hum of the tires, the faint whoosh of cars passing by, my own breathing. For the rest of the day, every sound felt precious, fleeting, like I needed to memorize them before they disappeared forever. And that night, I stared at the ceiling again, thinking about all the times I took sound for granted. The crickets outside, the fridge clicking on, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Would I ever hear those things clearly again? I woke up the next day with a mission figure out. If I was about to spend the price of a used car on hearing aids, or if there was another way. Because let me tell you, nothing wakes you up faster than realizing that tiny piece of plastic and wires costs more than your first MacBook. Back at the audiologist's office, Jenna sat me down for what I now lovingly call the great hearing aid sales pitch. But to her credit, she was pretty upfront about everything. These aren't your grandpa's hearing aids. She grinned, holding one up like Vanna White. They're smart, rechargeable, Bluetooth-enabled, and even have AI noise reduction. AI in my ear. Honestly, part of me was weirdly excited about that. I mean, we put AI in everything. These days, our phones, our cars, our refrigerators. Why not our heads? She went on. You can take calls directly through them. Stream Spotify. Even adjust the settings from your phone. And the app can tell you how noisy your environment is. Cool, I said, nodding. So basically, I'm Iron Man. Exactly. If Iron Man couldn't hear high-pitched voices in noisy restaurants, she chuckled. Tiny joke, but it landed. Then came the moment she slipped a demo pair into my ears. At first, nothing. Then, like someone slowly turning up the world's dimmer switch, I heard the air conditioner hum. The soft ticking of a clock. Her shoes shifting slightly against the floor. Stuff I hadn't even realized was missing. And then, my own voice. Holy cow. Nobody warns you about how weird your own voice sounds when you haven't heard it properly in a while. It was like listening to myself underwater, but in reverse. It takes time to adjust, Jenna said gently. Your brain has been filling in gaps for so long, it has to relearn what normal sounds like. Here's a fun random fact. Parrots have better hearing than most humans. Not only can they mimic our voices, but they also pick up on frequency patterns way beyond our range. Kind of humbling, right? A parrot can outhear me. Anyway, I spent the next hour walking around the clinic, testing them out, talking, listening, opening and closing drawers just to hear the satisfying clunk. It was like rediscovering the world. Then came the downside. The pair you tried is about 7,000. I blinked. For both. She nodded. Yes, and insurance. Typically, no. I laughed. Loudly. Almost obnoxiously. So let me get this straight. I can buy a 70-inch TV, 2 iPhones, and a gaming console for less than what it costs to hear my microwave beep. She smiled sympathetically. Pretty much. Historians still debate whether the lack of insurance coverage for hearing aids is a result of outdated medical policies or just the cruel joke of late-stage capitalism. Either way, not great. So began my deep dive into the world of hearing tech. Turns out there are over-the-counter hearing aids now. Less expensive, but not as powerful. There are PSAP's personal sound amplification products, which are like hearing aids, scrappy younger cousins. And then there's the black hole of online reviews. Some swear by cheaper models. Others say they're useless. I tried a pair of over-the-counter amplifiers. At first I was hopeful, but instead of enhancing the sounds I wanted to hear, it cranked up everything. The air conditioner sounded like a jet engine. My own chewing felt like someone smashing celery with a baseball bat. And forget crowded restaurants, total chaos. So back to Jenna, I went. Honestly, she said hearing aids work for most people, but they don't fix everything. They can't replace damaged nerves or fully restore lost frequencies. It's like cleaning a dirty window. You'll see better, but it's not the same as getting brand new glass. And that's when she hit me with the big one. For some people, hearing aids aren't enough. What does that mean? I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. Well, if the inner ear damage is too severe, your brain isn't getting enough signal to interpret. In that case, we look at cochlear implants. Cue dramatic music. I'd heard of those. Tiny electronic devices surgically implanted into the skull that bypass the damaged parts of the ear and directly stimulate the auditory nerve. It sounded terrifying and awesome and expensive and also terrifying. It's not as scary as it sounds, Jenna assured me, but it's a bigger decision. And it's only for people who meet the criteria. I sat there thinking about it, about the fact that this was real, that I wasn't just dealing with a little muffled hearing anymore. This was life-changing. Also, side note, did you know that whales can communicate across entire oceans using low-frequency sounds? Imagine hearing your buddy from thousands of miles away. Pretty impressive. And here I was struggling to hear someone across a dinner table. I left the office that day feeling conflicted. Part of me was relieved that there were options. Part of me was terrified about what those options meant. Was I ready for that? Ready to admit this was my reality now? I wasn't sure. The next couple of weeks were weird. I floated somewhere between denial determination and Googling things I probably shouldn't have. Cochlear implants, surgery videos, success stories, horror stories, rabbit holes, so many rabbit holes. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow standing at a crossroads between two versions of my life. The one where I squinted through sound, pretending everything was fine, and the one where I surrendered to technology in a very literal, let's put a computer inside your head kind of way. One night, I found myself watching this old TED Talk of a guy who had a cochlear implant. He described the first sound he ever heard post-surgery as, get this, robotic wind chimes underwater. That was both hilarious and horrifying. The thing is, cochlear implants don't actually restore hearing the way glasses fix vision. Instead of amplifying sound like a hearing aid does, they bypass the damaged inner ear entirely. Tiny electrodes get surgically implanted into your cochlea, the snail-shaped structure in your inner ear. And those electrodes send signals straight to your auditory nerve. In other words, your ear becomes a USB port for your brain. And here's the wild part. Historians still debate whether the cochlear implant is the single greatest medical invention for sensory loss, or whether it's just the beginning of a future where humans become increasingly cybernetic. After a consult with an ENT surgeon, the decision was made. My hearing in that ear was beyond what hearing aids could salvage. It was either keep struggling or try the implant. And yeah, I was scared, really scared. The day of surgery came faster than I expected. Hospitals are weird, bright, cold, smelling vaguely of antiseptic and bad coffee. I lay there in a gown, staring at the ceiling tiles, half expecting a nurse to wheel in a stack of forms titled, "So You've Decided to Become a Cyborg." A nurse came by to start my IV. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. She smiled. "That's normal, but hey, on the bright side, you'll finally be able to eavesdrop on people again." I laughed, nervously. "Yeah, assuming it works." "You'll be surprised," she winked. "Hearing isn't just sound, it's connection." Deep right. As the anesthesia kicked in, I remember the weirdest thought floating through my head. I hope they don't accidentally install Spotify Premium in here. The surgery took a few hours. I was unconscious for most of it, obviously, which was probably for the best. They drilled into my skull. Don't freak out. It's normal. Threaded electrodes into my cochlea and installed a small receiver behind my ear. On the outside, the processor would attach later, kind of like a magnetic disc that sticks to the implant under the skin. When I woke up, it was surreal, groggy, dizzy. My head was wrapped up like a cartoon mummy. I reached up instinctively and felt the bandages. No pain, really, just a weird pressure, like someone had set up a tent inside my skull. The nurse checked on me. "How you feeling?" "Like someone installed a garage door opener in my head," I mumbled. She chuckled. "That's not inaccurate." I went home the same day, slept a lot, ate soup, watched TV with captions as usual, and waited. Because here's the thing. After cochlear implant surgery, you don't get sound right away. You have to wait a few weeks for the swelling to go down before they activate it. Honestly, that waiting period was torture. Equal parts excitement and terror. Would it work? Would it sound normal? Would it sound like anything at all? Oh, and did you know that snakes hear through vibrations in their jawbones? They don't have external ears like us. Makes you wonder if Mother Nature just gave up halfway when designing humans. Anyway, activation day finally came. I sat in the audiologist's office again this time, with a weird magnetic disc stuck behind my ear and wires running to a processor clipped to my shirt. "All right," Jenna smiled. "I'm going to turn it on now." She clicked something on her computer, and then sound, sort of. It was indescribable. Beeps, chirps, static, like someone trying to tune an old radio while underwater, but also with a choir of tiny robots singing in the background. I blinked. Is this what it's supposed to sound like?" At first, yes, she nodded. "Your brain needs time. It'll start organizing it all soon." As weird as it was, I could already tell there were patterns. The rustle of her clothes, the clicking of her keyboard. My own voice sounded like a broken speak and spell toy. But it was sound. It was something. My brain was relearning how to decode it all, and as surreal as it was, I started smiling. Because, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trapped behind glass anymore. Over the next few weeks, my brain became a full-time sound detective. Every little noise felt like a puzzle it was trying desperately to solve. Some of it made sense quickly. Footsteps, doors closing. My cat knocking something over just to remind me who's boss. But other sounds, completely alien. For example, the refrigerator. I had no idea it made that weird little hum followed by a tiny mechanical tick every few minutes. Or the microwave. Oh man, when that thing beeped, it sounded less like a beep and more like a laser gun from an old sci-fi movie. The strangest by far was my own voice. At first, it didn't sound like me. It sounded like, well, imagine if a robot and a kazoo had a baby. That's what came out of my mouth every time I spoke. Jenna had warned me this would happen. Your brain has to reprogram itself, she explained. It's kind of like updating software. Except the update takes weeks. And she wasn't wrong. Every day got a little better. The static faded. The robotic buzz softened. Slowly, voices became more natural. Music, though. Music was a disaster. At least at first. Songs I'd loved for years now sounded like broken toy pianos being played underwater by a team of slightly drunk chipmunks. Music takes the longest, Jenna said during a follow-up appointment. The brain prioritizes speech first. Fun fact, you ready for this one? Some species of moths actually evolved ultrasonic hearing just to avoid bats. Literally, their ears only exist to hear one thing. A bat trying to eat them. I mean, evolution right? Hyper-specific, but effective. Anyway, while my brain was busy rewiring itself, I had to learn how to live with the gear attached to my head. The external processor clipped onto my shirt, connected by a thin wire to a magnetic disc that snapped onto my scalp directly over the implant. It was weird. No way around that. I worried it would fall off when I put on a hoodie. Spoiler, it did. Twice. I worried people would stare. Turns out, nobody noticed. And when they did, they mostly thought it was some fancy Bluetooth headset. New AirPods. One guy asked at the grocery store. Sure, I smiled. Something like that. But beyond the awkward gear moments, something else started happening. I noticed conversations were easier. I wasn't leaning in. I wasn't faking laughs. I wasn't smiling and nodding, hoping to God nobody asked me a follow-up question. I could hear, not perfectly, not like before, but enough. Enough to rejoin the world. And yeah, there were funny hiccups along the way. One night, I was lying in bed and heard this weird rhythmic clicking sound. Could not for the life of me figure out what it was. Spent 20 minutes searching the house. It was my neighbor's sprinkler system through the wall. I also learned the implant was super sensitive to electromagnetic interference. Like one time, I walked past my Wi-Fi router and heard static. Literal radio static. My implant was picking up Wi-Fi noise. It was like my head accidentally became an antenna for the internet. Historians still debate whether this kind of unintentional signal detection is a flaw in design or just an amusing side effect of cramming futuristic tech into a squishy human body. Despite all the quirks, the surgery changed my life. Not overnight, not instantly, but slowly, steadily. My favorite moment. A few weeks after activation, I went for a walk. Just me, no distractions. And suddenly, I heard birds. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I heard that sound. Not just one chirp, a whole chorus. High, fluttery trills, sharp little whistles. The sound of life. I stood there, probably looking like an absolute weirdo, grinning at the sky. Like I'd just discovered a secret nobody else knew. It hit me then. I wasn't just hearing sound. I was hearing the world again. The layers, the texture, the background noise of being alive. Of course, not everything was perfect. Group conversations were still hard sometimes. Crowded restaurants were a nightmare of overlapping chatter. And don't even get me started on how terrible public announcement systems sound. They were unintelligible before. Now they're just a wall of garbled chaos. But I adapted. I learned tricks. Sitting facing people. turning the good ear toward noise, using the app to adjust background levels on the fly. The implant didn't make me superhuman, but it gave me something back that I'd been slowly losing without realizing. And yeah, I laughed about it now. About the awkward misunderstandings. The times I'd answered, "Yeah, you too," when someone told me their dog died. The missed punchlines, the fake laughs, the guessing game that used to be daily life. Not anymore. Now when someone speaks, I hear them. Life with hearing loss, and now with this tiny sci-fi device embedded in my head, became a new normal. But here's the thing about normal. It changes. It shifts. It bends around you until one day you realize you don't think about it every second anymore. At first, every sound felt like a science experiment. Now it's just life. I wake up. Snap the external processor onto my head. Instant sound. The microwave hums. The cat yells at me for being 2 minutes late with breakfast. A car drives by outside. Birds. Always the birds now. Funny, isn't it? I used to tune them out. Now, they're the soundtrack to every morning. But it's not just the ordinary stuff that hits me differently. It's the laughter, the sighs, the subtle shifts in someone's voice when they're about to say something important. Things I didn't realize I was missing until they came flooding back. There's one moment that sticks with me. I was at a family barbecue. Everyone was talking, laughing, telling stories. And someone cracked a joke. A dumb one. A pun, honestly. Something about a chicken and a lawnmower. Completely ridiculous. But I heard it. I caught every word. And for the first time in years, I wasn't faking the laugh. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't nodding along, hoping it made sense. I got it. I laughed. Because it was funny, not because it was expected. That was everything. It made me think sound isn't just functional. It's emotional. It's how we belong, how we connect, how we stay tethered to each other. Of course, the journey isn't without its weird quirks. Like how sometimes if I stand too close to the microwave while it's running, the signal to my implant cuts out for half a second. Apparently, electromagnetic fields can mess with the signal. Yep, my brain temporarily goes offline because of leftover spaghetti. Or the time I was in a meeting and my implant suddenly started picking up a weird buzzing. I spent 5 minutes thinking my head was broken, until I realized someone had a wireless speaker running in the next room on the same frequency band. Fun fact, you know how elephants can hear sounds below the range of human hearing, like actual seismic vibrations from miles away. It's how they sense distant storms. Meanwhile, I can barely survive walking past a Wi-Fi router without getting static in my skull. Evolution's funny like that. But despite the hiccups, I wouldn't trade it. Because here's the real truth, hearing loss didn't just take away sound. It took away confidence. I didn't realize how often I'd withdrawn from conversations, how often I'd let moments pass by rather than risk saying sorry. What was that? Now I'm back in it, fully, awkward, sarcastic, overly talkative. Me. There are still hard days. Loud restaurants are still overwhelming. Group phone calls. Forget about it. And yes, there are moments where I have to remind people, hey, give me a second. I'm adjusting my settings. Kind of like updating your phone. But your phone is your head. But there's also so much joy. Like hearing the sizzle of onions hitting a hot pan, or the clink of ice cubes in a glass, or the absolute chaos of walking into a kindergarten classroom and thinking, wow, this is a lot. I even started appreciating silence in a new way. Not the heavy, isolating silence from when I couldn't hear, but chosen silence. Taking the processor off at the end of the day. Letting the world fade. Sometimes it's peaceful, like a pause button for life. People often ask me, was it worth it? Every single time, the answer is yes. It wasn't just about hearing better. It was about living louder, about choosing not to fade into the background, about refusing to become invisible in a world that moves fast, talks fast, and expects you to keep up. And you know what? I do keep up. Sometimes with a laugh, sometimes with a sarcastic, "Hang on, let me turn my head." Wi-Fi back on. But I keep up. Historians still debate whether humans are truly adaptable or whether we've just convinced ourselves we are because change is inevitable. But standing here, magnetic disc stuck to my scalp, hearing the wind rustle through the trees, I'm pretty sure adaptability is in our DNA. This whole journey taught me something I didn't expect. Hearing loss isn't just a medical problem. It's a human one. It's about how we connect, how we show up for each other, how we exist in the noise and sometimes the quiet of the world. And now, I live loud. I laugh louder. And yeah, I hear the punchlines now. So, if you've made it this far, first of all, thank you for listening to my story. Really, it means more than you probably realize, because this isn't just a story about ears or hearing aids or tiny computers wired into my skull. This is a story about what it means to lose something quietly and then fight to get it back. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: hearing isn't just sound. It's laughter. It's belonging. It's the small, ordinary noises that stitch a day together. The clink of a coffee cup, the shuffle of shoes, the way someone's voice softens when they say your name. I won't lie to you. This journey was scary. It was frustrating. It was expensive. It was weird in ways I never could have imagined. And no, it didn't magically make everything perfect. But it gave me back a part of my life that I didn't even realize was slipping away. And for anyone out there listening who's struggling, whether it's hearing loss or something else that makes you feel like you're standing just a little too far from the world, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not less. You're just figuring out a new way to be part of the noise. And sometimes the noise is beautiful. I still take my processor off at the end of the day. I still choose silence sometimes. But when I wake up and I snap that magnet back onto my head, the world switches on. The birds, the breeze, the laughter, the living. So yeah, I live loud now. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.